Your own flesh and blood trades your life to pay off a cartel debt. Anna thought she was bravely walking into a lion's den to save her brother Arthur from the mob. But Dante Rossi revealed the sickening truth. Arthur was caught 3 weeks ago. To save his own skin from a $2 million debt, he purposely set a digital trap to deliver his brilliant sister right to a syndicate boss. Now she is trapped, playing a survival game with the devil. Let us freeze the frame right here and look at this scene together. This is the exact second the trap finally snaps shut. We hear that heavy deadbolt click into place, a metallic thud echoing through the shadowy penthouse like the closing of a tomb. Anna steps across the threshold, genuinely believing she holds the winning hand. The tragic irony is painful to watch. Dante does not yell or draw a weapon. He simply slips the brass key into his tailored suit, methodically unbuttons his cuffs, and flashes a hollow smile that promises absolute ruin. "You wanted to play," he murmurs, his voice stripped of all human warmth. Outside, the freezing rain hammers against the glass, severing her from the city below. It is a harsh reality of life. Sometimes our most fatal mistakes happen exactly when we are completely convinced we are in control. To understand how she wound up in this psychological nightmare, we have to rewind the tape. Picture Anna completely alone in her freezing office, her tired face glowing in the harsh blue light of her monitors. Her brilliant mind is hardwired to catch corporate lies and hunt down financial ghosts. But deep inside the financial arteries of Dante Rossi, that she accidentally awakens a sleeping predator. $72 million. That is the precise figure drained from his shipping empire into untraceable offshore accounts. The horror is not the stolen cash itself, but the glaring digital fingerprint left totally exposed on the ledger. We can almost see her trembling hand covering her mouth as her pulse violently spikes. As a brutal as which almost eventually face sometimes doing your job perfectly is the very thing that destroys your peace. The digital trail leads directly to her older brother, Arthur. The camera lingers on her tear-filled eyes as her heart completely shatters. He is not a criminal mastermind, just a desperate manager eaten alive by a vicious gambling addiction. In a move of pure insanity, he stole from the most lethal crime syndicate on the coast simply to pay off another cartel. Anna instantly grasps the grim reality of the situation. If anyone discovers this paper trail, her brother, a dead man. This is the exact moment her cold, rational logic shatters, replaced entirely by a fierce, desperate love for her family. Knowing the local police are already bought and paid for, she downloads the encrypted proof onto a physical drive and wipes the mainframe clean. We often learn the hard way that deep love makes us entirely blind to fatal danger. She clutches the only copy in existence, genuinely believing this tiny plastic rectangle gives her the upper hand. Her plan is tragically naive. She hopes to face a ruthless cartel leader, offer to repay the stolen fortune through personal loans, and somehow buy her brother a second chance. At 11 at night, the jaws of the trap finally open. A burner phone illuminates the dark with strict rules. The penthouse. Midnight. Come alone. The building itself is a giant spike of cold steel, practically built to crush the human spirit. A dead-eyed guard pats her down and triggers the elevator in absolute silence. Her trembling reflection stares back as that agonizing ride up 68 floors feels exactly like a slow funeral march. If you walk willingly into the pitch dark, you can never be surprised when the monsters step out to meet you. Walk through these heavy doors with me for a moment. Every single inch of this space screams pure dominance. When the elevator finally opens, Anna steps into a massive, shadowy room glowing with amber light and cold concrete art. Dante stands by the polished bar pouring a glass of expensive scotch, looking infinitely more like dark royalty than a common Main Street thug. It is a terrifying truth that immense wealth is the perfect camouflage for a psychopath. He possesses razor-sharp features and eyes utterly devoid of light. When he finally speaks her name, the low number observes Hulda makes stomach violently plummet. He casually jokes that he expected a cheap blackmailer, not a girl shaking so badly he can hear her heartbeat across the marble. True power never has to shout to be deeply felt. It only ever has to whisper. She tries agonizingly hard to steady her voice, desperately insisting she is no common blackmailer. She calls it a simple business transaction. Her knuckles turn bone white as she grips her bag, using the hidden hard drive as a pathetic anchor against the rising tide of panic. Then Dante slowly turns around. The sheer physical size of the man instantly swallows all the oxygen in the room. He sweeps his dark gaze over her, dissecting her dripping coat and trembling frame like a tragic science experiment. Transaction, he repeats, before slamming his heavy crystal glass onto the marble. With a violent crack, he advances so quickly her instincts scream to run, but the rich scent of dark tobacco and bitter citrus completely paralyzes her. Fear is a heavy chain, and tragically, we are usually the ones who lock it around our own necks. Watch how effortlessly he shatters her entire reality. He steps into her personal space, his imposing shadow overwhelming her. Leaning down to her ear, he whispers the question that instantly turns her blood like ice. Did she really believe she found that stolen fortune by mere accident? He calmly confesses her brother was a walking corpse the second those funds vanished. But a predator gets bored easily. He studied her corporate file, marveling at her genius and her tragic family loyalty. He intentionally left the digital doors open, dropping breadcrumbs just to see how deep into the dark she would walk. The devastating realization hits her hard. She was the prize all along, and Arthur was nothing but bait. The hardest truth to swallow is realizing we walked willingly into the fire, because you can never outsmart the devil when he wrote the rules. That brings us back to where we started, you and I, that awful metallic click, the sound of absolute doom. Dante slides the key away, his dark eyes fixed on her with a sick, obsessive hum that makes your skin crawl. All that matters. If she loses, she belongs entirely to him. The suffocating silence that follows is purposely designed to make her brilliant mind tear itself apart. We can see the sheer terror in her eyes as she frantically scans the room for any possible exit, but the elevator demands his biometric fingerprint. The reinforced glass only offers a 68-story plunge to the concrete streets below. She is helplessly trapped. True desperation begins the exact second you finally realize that hope was nothing but a cruel illusion. She orders him to let her go, but her trembling voice shakes so badly the command just sounds incredibly tragic. A dark smirk plays on Dante's lips as he loosens his silk tie, looking perfectly relaxed while she hyperventilates. In a move of staggering arrogance, he points to the phone and dares her to call the police. He even provides the name of a dirty detective currently on his payroll. It is the most brutal kind of psychological manipulation. He is methodically proving that no knight in shining armor is coming to save her. Pressed against the freezing glass, she finally whispers the question every hostage inevitably asks. What do you want from me? He stops inches from her face and calmly promises to tear her brilliant mind apart. The hardest lesson in life is accepting that some people simply want to watch you break. He unbuttons his collar just enough to reveal the dark ink creeping up his neck, a chilling warning of the pure violence hiding beneath the expensive suit. Pacing the polished floor, he calmly explains his twisted sense of justice. Because she dared to hack into his private sanctuary, her life belongs to him now. But since this man loves playing God, he offers a cruel puzzle. He drops a velvet box onto the glass table with a hard thud. He tells her there are 3 hidden safes inside this massive penthouse. One holds the exit code and a paper that lets her brother walk away, breathing. But when her shaking voice asks what happens if she fails, the trap shuts completely. She has exactly 48 hours to figure it out. A ticking clock is the heaviest, most agonizing weight you can ever strap to your human soul. Stick with me here because this is where the psychological game gets truly sick. He turns her brilliant mind into a weapon against her. He tells her she will need those forensic skills to locate the hidden codes, but promises to relentlessly play with her sanity along the way. Every wrong guess comes with a deeply personal penalty. When she asks what the punishment is, his rich voice drops dangerously low, wrapping her in the terrifying threat of captivity. He promises to strip away every physical and emotional boundary she has ever built. He wants her completely powerless, existing entirely at his mercy. If the clock runs out, her brother catches a bullet, and she never breathes outside air again. We often forget that sometimes our greatest gifts are exactly the things that end up destroying us. Listen closely, because use the poisonous
He wants to methodically dismantle her soul until she surrenders.
She fiercely whispers she will. You and I are going to unpack this story together, because the psychological layering here is absolutely brilliant. With his sharp face inches from hers, Dante softly lays down the brutal law of the room. She must obey his voice, yielding to his every touch. He whispers that fighting back is a game that will cost her everything. Then he releases her so abruptly, her knees buckle against the floor. For the next 6 hours, Anna loses her mind, tearing through mahogany bookshelves and scratching at classical paintings in search of a clue. Dante merely sits back with a dark espresso, watching his prey burn through her energy with a cold smile. The greatest tragedy of human nature is seeing how fiercely we fight when we have already lost the war. Freeze the frame right here. It is 4 a.m, and harsh lighting casts heavy shadows under Anna's panicked eyes. She is running entirely on sheer adrenaline. Her trembling fingers find a note beneath a heavy humidor, written in Dante's immaculate script. It connects a bloody ledger to an iron anchor. Her mind immediately screams, the wine cellar. She throws her exhausted body down those brutal spiral stairs. For a full hour, her raw hands scrape against vintage iron racks, finding nothing. Then, the slow, heavy thud of his footsteps echoes from the top stair. It breaks your heart to watch, but it teaches us a simple life lesson. When we run on pure, blind desperation, we completely miss the traps laid right at our own feet. This is the exact moment Dante steps into the frame as the ultimate predator. The camera follows him slowly descending into the freezing cellar, his dark silhouette entirely swallowing the tiny corner where Anna cowers. He leans in close and whispers that she missed the hidden door by a single inch, doing this purely to watch the pulse flutter wildly at her throat. It is profoundly cruel, yet somehow impossible to look away. He presses her fragile frame against the damp stone wall, proving he owns the very air filling her lungs. He is systematically tearing down her nervous system, Simpsy. She simply squeezes her eyes shut, Trom. There's a lesson from her silent terror. The heaviest, most unbreakable chains anyone can put on you are never made of iron. Notice how he orders her to open her eyes, forcing her to look at him before the kiss. Do not mistake this for romance, because he is branding her soul. This extreme contact completely overloads her logical mind. The true tragedy is captured in her trembling hands gripping his shirt. It is the devastating spark of a trauma bond. Her exhausted body betrays her. Pulling back, he whispers she has one strike down. Two more and her game ends forever. But here is a twisted genius. He does not drag her to a freezing dungeon. He carries her straight to his own massive bed. Lesson here is deeply chilling. The fastest way to completely break someone is not locking them in the dark, but trapping them in pure luxury. The camera slowly pans across this master bedroom, and it rivals a 5-star luxury suite. It features heavy silk sheets and a vast closet filled with garments tailored exactly to her measurements. That is where the true psychological horror lies. It is cold proof that he has been watching her every breath for months. As the morning sun rises, painting the skyline in bruised purple hues, Anna remains completely paralyzed. She paces the hardwood floor, her skin still burning from the lingering ghost of his touch. In her racing mind, she desperately tries to hate him, yet bring us to Elena's entirely maud. It brings us to a vital life lesson. The most presents are the ones that look so beautiful. You start doubting you even want to escape. Let us take a closer look at this dynamic because this is exactly how a trauma bond takes root. Her deepest shame is not about being held captive. It is the twisted thrill she feels from his absolute dominance. At 8 in the morning, Dante strolls in carrying hot espresso and fresh fruit. His dark hair is damp, and he wears soft clothes, shedding his terrifying persona for a dangerously gentle disguise. When he tells her to eat, she shrinks into the corner like a wounded bird. He never raises his voice. Instead, he uses a quiet, immovable force to guide her into the chair, showing her that free will is just a ghost. It is a brutal life lesson. The strongest cages in this world are not built with iron bars, but with the quiet, devastating illusion of choice. The camera deliberately lingers on this suffocating power dynamic. Dante guides Anna into the chair, threatening to feed her himself. It is a terrifying invasion of personal space. Sensing the trap, Anna takes the food, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Dante sits across the polished table, sipping his hot espresso. He locks his dark eyes with hers, refusing to blink, establishing absolute dominance. The silence is heavy enough to crush bone. When her voice finally breaks, asking why she is alive when he could easily kill her brother, Dante lowers his cup. He leans in close, preparing to dismantle her entire reality. Here is a haunting life lesson. True psychological control rarely starts with violence. It begins the second someone starts dictating your smallest daily habits. Watch Dante fully embrace that chilling God complex. He tells her that humans are painfully predictable because they lie, beg, and die. But Anna was a glitch in his system, walking straight into his violent world to sacrifice herself. Then he drops the psychological killing blow. Her brother never needed saving. Arthur sold her out to cover his massive debts. You can see the pure shock crash over Anna as her reality shatters. She frantically begs him to explain Spain. Dante drops his smirk. His face goes clinically cold, tearing down her delusions by revealing they caught Arthur 3 weeks ago. It is heartbreaking to watch, but it teaches a harsh life lesson. Sometimes, the people we burn ourselves alive to save are the exact ones who happily pushed us into the fire. Anna spirals instantly into desperate denial, using the mind's ultimate shield against trauma. She cries out, insisting she saw the bloody ledgers with her own eyes. Dante counters with terrifying smoothness. He drops his voice to a hypnotic whisper, severing her from her own memories. He explains that Arthur owed a rival syndicate $2 million and had 1 week to pay up. Pure panic chokes Anna as she begs him to stop. This is how a predator isolates a victim, positioning himself as the absolute source of truth. Dante stands up, letting his shadow swallow her, and details the sickening trade. Arthur surrendered his sister to save his own skin. It is an agonizing life lesson. Blind loyalty is incredibly dangerous because it often hides the brutal trap waiting beneath your feet. The irony here is suffocating. Dante explains how Arthur left a trail, knowing her brilliant mind would follow it straight into a slaughterhouse to pay his debt. Anna finally snaps. She hammers her fists against his chest, screaming that it is a sick lie designed to break her. Dante does not flinch. He stands like a stone monument, letting her burn through that frantic energy. This is how the poisonous seed of a trauma bond is planted. When her punches dissolved in Zayshima, he gently pins her wrists and pulls her into a warm embrace. He never needs lies to ruin her, making himself her only safe harbor. It brings us to a chilling life lesson. The most dangerous people in this world do not just slice you open. They patiently wait around to become your only bandage. Dante whispers the inescapable truth. Her own flesh and blood sold her to the monster, but then he hits her with a masterful psychological pivot. If she cracks his code, she can walk free and get revenge. If she fails, she must accept that only her kidnapper values her. Anna sobs against his chest, completely broken. The brother she risked everything for was the architect of her doom. The terrifying visual here is that the psychopath holding her hostage is now the only anchor keeping her from collapsing. The game just violently flipped. It brings us to a devastating life lesson. When your world shatters, you must be incredibly careful about who you lean on. Some people will hold you tightly just to make absolutely certain you never have the strength to stand back up. Stick with me here and let us really look at her face. We watched Anna panic, desperate to save her brother, but the second she realizes he set her up, that fear freezes into ice-cold rage. Her own blood weaponized her loyal heart to save his skin. The mob boss might be the devil, but her brother is the Judas who sold her out. For 4 straight hours, she violently tears that massive library apart. With 36 hours left, she takes all that crushing grief and locks it away inside her mind. She is officially done playing for him and is playing purely for her survival now. It is a brutal scene, but there is a harsh truth here. Real clarity never arrives until you stop crying over the person who stabbed you and start fighting to save yourself. Let's look at how trauma actually bends a person's moral compass. Dante seals the heavy door, trapping Anna in a suffocating bones by the frantic tearing of paper and the mocking tick of a tall clock. Instead of blindly chasing his riddles, she finally stops and studies the architect of her nightmare. Her previous failures came from treating him like a rational man, ignoring his massive theatrical ego. Dante operates like a hunter drunk on poetic irony. Once she adopts that dark mindset, the answer clicks. She pulls a hollowed-out copy of the book Inferno from the shelf, a clue she dismissed earlier as too arrogant to be real. The lesson here is sharp and true. Pure logic will never save you from a master manipulator. You must crawl into the monster's mind and view the board through his twisted eyes. Let us pause the praying frame right here.
The psychological snare. Dane's building.
We've probably both made the mistake of assuming a predator relies on brute force. But this man is an artist of human frailty. The camera tracks Anna bolting from the library, her feet slapping against the cold marble. The shadows stretch, seemingly clawing at her ankles. She runs on unfiltered urinal, linking a cryptic note about blood to the violent contrasts of old paintings. It brings us to a deeply tragic truth. When we sprint blindly away from our fears, driven by nothing but panic, we run directly into the very cage designed to break us. Breathe, and in that breathless desperation, the shield's glove finally snaps shut. The camera lingers as Anna skids to a halt before a massive frame in the corridor. The painting shows a weeping woman paralyzed in a slash of light, while absolute darkness swallows the world around her. It is a suffocating mirror of her own tragedy. Her chest heaves, heartbeat thudding in the dead silence. Desperation takes over. Her trembling fingers trace the wooden border, pressing hard against the canvas, begging for a hidden latch. Finding nothing but solid wood, a sob catches in her throat. Then, her eyes drop to a tarnished brass nameplate, 1597. She grips the freezing metal. In our darkest hours, we often fixate so heavily on the towering terror in front of us that we completely miss the tiny detail offering our only way out. The brass plate slides sideways with a heavy grind. With a slow hiss, the antique frame swings outward, exposing the cold glare of a modern keypad demanding a 4-digit PIN. Before Anna can even draw a ragged breath, a smooth voice slithers out from the crushing shadows, softly offering congratulations. She spins around, eyes wide with pure panic. Dante leans against the stone archway, sleeves rolled up to reveal the dark syndicate ink staining his skin. He balances 2 heavy glasses of amber bourbon. The dim lighting catches the liquor, creating a cruel illusion of comfort. This is a profound lesson in survival. A warm smile or a poured drink in the dark rarely means safety. It is merely the predator offering a toast to a game they know they have already won. You and I can almost feel the physical toll it takes to hold a toned. Anna locks her trim knees, forcing his avoidance to a fragile imitation of steel as she demands the code. Dante merely glides into the light, moving with the terrifying grace of a predator. He extends the bourbon, a silent gesture demanding her absolute compliance. The stakes are devastating. 3 wrong guesses, and the vault seals for good. Leaning close enough for her to feel the cold radiating off his skin, he whispers that she belongs entirely to him. He offers a hint, but demands a raw truth in exchange. The brutal lesson here is impossible to ignore. True monsters do not just want to break you physically, they want your deepest shame, because once someone holds your secrets, they own your soul. He is demanding the secret she buried deep within her own mind. The camera pushes in on Anna, staring at the blinking red light of the keypad. 10,000 combinations. It is an impossible war. Defeated, she lowers her chin, silently accepts the devilish bargain. Dante takes a slow sip of his bourbon, eyes feeding on the power of her submission. He casually drops the hint. The code is the exact year his crime family spilled their first drop of blood on American concrete. Anna closes her eyes, letting data wash over her panic, remembering the months spent tracking his empire through endless shell companies. It is a quiet truth we all eventually face. When terror threatens to drown you, anchoring your mind to cold facts is the only raft keeping your sanity afloat. Anna attempts to build a mental fortress out of logic.
Her voice barely a whisper, She recites that his grandfather arrived in 1914, but the syndicate incorporated in 1920.
This is the exact moment Dante shows his fangs. Stepping closer, he corrects her with a gentle tone, reminding her that incorporation is mere ink, and he specifically asked for blood. The word strikes her like a physical blow. Her breath catches as her mind plunges into the violent depths of mob history, recalling a redacted police file about a brutal execution in 1928. Here lies a deeply tragic life lesson. We must be incredibly careful when we dig up the dark histories of others, because the buried skeletons we uncover are often destined to pull us under.
Notice the cinematic
cruelty of this fleeting hope.
The trembling fingers just punching the numbers. 1928. Followed by a green light.
Anna exhales a ragged breath, believing she has conquered the beast. She reaches into the dark cavity, desperate for the documents to save her brother. Instead, her fingers brush cold velvet and thick parchment. Tearing the note open, her face falls well. The handwriting dictates that freedom must be worn in the light, surrounded by wolves. She breaks. Screaming, he promised the sabled her salvation. Dante merely tilts his glass, using his chilling calm to amplify her panic. The lesson is clear. When a bargain with the devil feels easy, you are just stepping deeper into hell. The shadows converge as Dante steps close, stripping oxygen from the hallway. He whispers that her answer was correct, but her debt of truth is due. The lens captures the second Anna's emotional armor splinters. Tears spill as she confesses the darkest corner of her soul. She did not steal that dirty money out of devotion to her brother. She did it out of rotting guilt because she lured him into the underground gambling rings in the first place. Dante watches her righteous mask burn away, intoxicated by the ruin of her morality. He breathes against her ear that her guilt is pathetic, but her hidden cruelty is divine. The life lesson is a heavy burden. Our unhealed shame is the strongest chain we wear, and monsters will always use it to hold the leash. With the grace of a cruel king, he pulls the velvet box from the safe, offering it like a scrap to a wounded animal. The lid snaps open to reveal a heavy collar of diamonds. He commands her to put it on. Stick with me. This is where the imagery gets powerful. The camera treats the jewelry not as a romantic gift, but as a glittering shackle. Cut to the suffocating silence of an armored car gliding through the black city streets. Anna sits paralyzed, wrapped in a silk gown he had waiting. The massive gems rest against her collarbone, feeling exactly like iron chains pulling her throat tight. It is a haunting symbol of a tragic truth. Golden handcuffs are still handcuffs. No matter how jeweled a cage may appear, its only real purpose is to strip away your freedom. Beside her in the dark leather interior, Dante's body looks like an apex predator poured into a flawless tuxedo. They accelerate toward an elite masquerade ball. The lighting shifts, casting fractured reflections across Anna's pale face as the neon city bleeds past the bulletproof glass. Her mind calculates an escape. Her voice shakes as she asks, why should not scream for the police? The steps into the lobby. Dante does not even blink. Staring straight ahead, he softly replies that Wilsa will stay quiet because she is a highly intelligent woman. It is a terrifying realization of total dominance. The real lesson is chilling. Ultimate power never cowers in the shadows. It operates boldly in the blinding light because it already owns the very people you would beg to save you. Let us pull this moment apart together, you and I. Watch how Dante strips away her last shred of hope. He casually notes that every security guard at the door is already bought. Then comes the fatal blow. He warns that the second she leaves his protection, a man named Victor Sterling will drag her into the shadows. Her chest tightens as she asks who Sterling is. The lens lingers on Dante as he reveals the crushing reality. Sterling is the brutal kingpin her brother actually owes. The betrayal hits her fast. Her own brother tried to sell her to both crime families to save his own skin. Dante took her to block his rival. The hardest truth we ever face is this. Sometimes the people sharing our blood are the very first to throw us straight to the wolves. The psychological whiplash here is stunning. We see her tormentor suddenly shift into her only shield. Dante did not drag her into this dark world for a game. He took her off the board so his rival could not use her. Utterly drained, a single tear falls down Anna's cheek as she whispers a heavy question. Why protect her? Dante leans in close. The cold scent of his cologne sears itself into her memory. He tells her that because she dared to challenge his syndicate, she belongs to him now, his to break, and his alone to guard. Bright camera flashes explode outside the car, lighting up the dark interior. Bitter reality. When life makes you choose between two evils, the monster acting as your savior is usually the one who owns your soul entirely. The heavy oak doors swing wide in silence. The lens tilts to catch Dante holding out his hand. When Anna takes it, she feels the ruined, brutal texture of his knuckles. Notice this contrast. These are not the soft hands of an executive. These are the fists of a man who crushes his rivals. They step into the blinding glow of a grand ballroom. He shoves a cold silver mask into her palms, erasing her identity, turning her into a caged bird. He snaps on his own dark mask. Smile, he orders. His heavy palm presses into her lower spine like an anchor. The wolves are watching, he warns. It is a grim lesson in survival we all must face. When you find yourself trapped with one's monsters, you have to choose to wear their skin or they will eat you alive. The camera follows Anna as she plays the perfect mob wife. She takes tiny sips of champagne, fighting to hide the way her hands are shaking. Notice how the armed guards melt into the walls when Dante walks by. A nervous politician grabs his attention and Dante gives Anna a sharp order to stay exactly where she is. She freezes next to a massive ice sculpture, her brain working on overdrive to figure out where the vault key is hidden. Then a smooth, oily voice slithers over her shoulder. A beautiful bird in a dangerous cage. The stranger purrs. She spins around to find a tall man, his silver hair shining above a bright gold mask. The lesson here is as old as time. The most lethal traps we ever face are almost always handed to us in the most beautiful, shiny wrapping. The camera pushes in on this new threat. He wears an easy smile, but the lighting catches his flat, light-filled eyes. His stance is loose, yet he holds the coiled energy of a striking snake. I do not believe we have met, Anna says. Watch how she physically steps back, her deep survival instincts screaming at her. To run, Victor Sterling, he replies, giving a mocking bow. He instantly uses her brother as a weapon, calling Dante a mindless thug who cannot see her real worth. All the blood leaves Anna's face. This is the man who wants to sell her. Her eyes scan the crowded room, frantically looking for Dante. It is a tragic paradox of human survival. Sometimes the world gets so dark that you actually start praying for the monster who's caged you to come back and save you from the devil. I have absolutely nothing to say to you, she tells Sterling. The room noise fades, so we hear the pure ice in her voice. Sterling just laughs. He tries a massive trick, claiming Dante made up the traffickings just to look like a hero. I am merely a businessman, he lies, offering to sneak her out and forgive her brother's debt. Focus squarely on her face right here. Watch the tiny shifts in her expression. She is a brilliant auditor. She knows the federal agents just froze his bank accounts. He is bleeding money and would never just let her go.
She is the bait he desperately needs to destroy Dante. Remember this bit true. Never trust a drowning man offering you an easy way out.
Because the hidden price of that exit is almost always your own life. You are lying, Anna states flatly. The camera shifts, and her posture completely changes. The scared hostage is gone, replaced by a professional wielding cold data. Your shell company just lost $70 million, she tells him. You just want to use me to force Dante to pay your debts. The charming smile rots right off Sterling's face. The shadows deepen as he lunges to grab her. But before he can even touch her, a massive hand clamps down on his shoulder. Dante's voice drops so low it vibrates the champagne glasses. If you touch her, I will sever your hand and beat you to death with it. The irony of our world is truly profound. Sometimes the only thing keeping a starving wolf from killing you is an infinitely more violent beast standing right by your side. Pay close attention to how this scene is staged. Sterling freezes, color rushing out of his face, before he mumbles an apology and melts into the crowd. Dante does not even look at him. A true predator never cares about a coward running away. His obsession is saved entirely for what belongs to him. The lens pushes in on Dante's dark stare, locked completely on Anna. He watches her frantic breathing, the proud, tragic way she holds her chin. Without a sound, he grabs her wrist. He pulls her into the middle of the room, just as the orchestra breaks into a huge waltz. He drags her flush against his chest, holding her with a crushing, terrifying kind of ownership. Always remember this truth. Overwhelming passion is often just another beautiful, tightly locked cage. Anna snaps back that she had the situation under control. Her heart is hammering so hard she feels it against his solid chest. Dante instantly shuts her down, his voice a low growl, warning that she just picked a fight with a cartel boss. But listen closely to the way he says it. Underneath all that rough anger, there is a twisted, undeniable sense of pride. He whispers that her wild bravery will either get her killed or make her a queen. Right in that heavy, tense moment, the lighting shifts. Anna glances down at his sharp tuxedo and sees it. Hidden deep inside his silk pocket is the heavy brass key. It is the exact tool she needs to finally escape him. This is a brutal truth of the human condition. Our deepest desires are always dangling right over the teeth of a lethal trap. Staring at that key, Anna realizes she must pull off a perfect act of psychological warfare to make this monster drop his guard. We see this dark dance in nature when a trapped animal fakes its surrender. Anna slowly lets her spine relax, melting her weight into his chest. She just slides shaking hand up his neck, weaving her fingers into his hair. Dante reacts exactly as a starving man would. His breathing hitches, his massive hands grip her waist tighter, and his eyes burn with absolute hunger. She whispers that he is right, that she really is fearless. As he leans in, completely drunk on her beautiful lie, her other hand starts its agonizing, quiet slide toward that brass key. Never forget this simple lesson. The pure illusion of surrender is often the sharpest weapon we can wield. Picture the sweeping motion of this camera shot. The orchestra gets louder, the heavy groan of the cellos shaking the floorboards. As they spin under the bright chandeliers, they look exactly like a dark king and his loyal queen, but beneath the fine clothes and the music, they are fighting a quiet, violent war. Anna is running on pure survival instinct. She keeps her left hand tight on his neck, stroking his pulse to give his brain a false sense of comfort. At the same time, her right hand crawls down his jacket, millimeter by slow, terrifying millimeter, all the while Dante holds her in a pure vice grip, totally blind to her trap. The hardest lesson we ever learn in life is this: absolute control is almost always nothing more than a beautiful, terrifying illusion. Dante moves with the grace of a hunting cat. He is the kind of man who steals the oxygen in a room just by breathing. His dark eyes are locked onto hers, burning with anger and obsession. Knowing he is watching her, Anna takes a shaky breath and lets her eyes just flutter closed, selling the beautiful lie that she is fully surrendering. Stick with me here, because this is where she turns the tables. As she breathes out, her fingers finally brush the silk of his pocket. She feels the cold metal of the key. Using the same sleight of hand she used to hide flash drives during audits, she smoothly slides it out. Her nerve is truly incredible. It is a vital lesson for us all. Sometimes, actual survival means closing your eyes and stepping blindly right into the very heart of the fire. She slides the brass key upward, hiding the theft by stepping into his personal space and pressing her body flush against his chest. The friction makes Dante gasp. He reacts instantly, wrapping a heavy arm around her waist and pulling her tight into his frame. The key slips free. She hides the cold metal in her palm, resting that hand innocently over his heart. The waltz hits its thundering peak. Dante spins her out, catches her wrist, and yanks her backward into a deep dip. The camera flips entirely. Anna stares upside down into the dark eyes of a literal killer. Look at the brutal power dynamic here. He leaves her hanging over the marble floor, forcing her to see exactly how holds her fragile life. The lesson here is simple. Forced vulnerability is the ultimate display of absolute power. You and I have probably felt the high of outsmarting someone, only to realize later they simply let us win. Watch this devastating reality check. A terrifying smile stretches across Dante's face. He leans down until his lips graze her ear. He asks if she truly believed she could pick of a boss who built his empire by noticing stolen pennies. Anna goes entirely rigid. Her blood turns to ice. He knew the exact microsecond her skin brushed the brass. Dante smoothly hauls her upright as the crowd erupts into loud applause. He casually adjusts his cuffs and tells her to keep the key as a trophy for her bravery. He treats her desperate fight for freedom like a cheap magic trick. Here is a simple truth. True dominance is simply letting the bird believe the door to the cage is wide open. The tragedy here is the profound admiration bleeding through his eyes. He murmurs that no one survives attempting to rob him, yet she elevated it into an art form. Before Anna can press confusing mixes of humiliation and his praise, reality shatters the moment. The camera pans sharply. Leo materializes from the shadows, his posture rigid. Under the applause he whispers that Sterling did not retreat. Hence, he has armed men securing the elevators and cars idling outside. Sterling is making a violent play to take her right now. In a single cinematic heartbeat, the seductive lover evaporates completely. The man left standing there is a ruthless syndicate kingpin, a cold machine of unyielding violence. Always remember this simple lesson. Peace is merely the fleeting breath you take before the real war begins.
Let us pause right here. You and I are going to watch this beautiful disaster unfold together. Look at Dante. His jaw locks up tight, his eyes sweeping the room like a radar tracking missiles.
He actually scoffs at the idea of a public ambush. Then he grabs the wrist of Anna. He does not hold her like a protector, but like a prison warden. He lays out the rules. Do not speak. Do not run. Let go, and the wolves out there will tear her to shreds. Anna is practically choking on her own fear, asking where they are going, and Danny just drags her straight toward the kitchen doors. The irony here is thick. He is dragging her away from one pack of wolves, right into the jaws of another. Remember this life lesson. Sometimes the hand pulling you to safety is the exact same one locking your cage.
Picture the absolute absurdity of this scene. Waiters drop heat trays in pure panic while Dante strolls through the stainless steel kitchen like he's picking out produce at a market.
Two goons of the rival boss kick open the loading dock doors, aiming massive rifles. Anna screams, but Dante just yanks her behind a giant meat freezer. Gunshots absolutely shred the expensive plates, bouncing off the metal walls. His bodyguard Leo starts shooting back like a trained machine, while Anna curls up on the floor, completely breaking down. And Dante? He just stands over her, casually pulling out his gun. He is not sweating. He is not shaking. Life teaches us a terrifying truth here. In the face of absolute death, the scariest thing is a man who treats violence like a minor traffic jam. The man honestly looks like someone just cut in front of him in line at the coffee shop, barks at her to stay down, steps out, and fires 2 shots. 2 heavy bodies hit the floor. It is over, just like that. He drags Anna up, and she is shivering like a leaf. Her clean corporate world is gone, replaced by the ugly reality of blood on white tiles. Dante grabs her face, forcing her to look directly at him instead of the men. He tells her to breathe, promising her that as long as she is with him, she is totally safe. He shoves her into a waiting armored car.
Do you see the twisted joke here? Who just executed 2 people playing the hero? The painfulness of traumas makes us cling to the closest life raft,
even if it is covered in blood. Let us examine this brilliant psychological wreckages together. Armored car tears through the dark streets, leaving the blood far behind. Anna is trembling in the expensive leather seat, gripping that brass key so hard her knuckles look like chalk. Dante stares at the tinted window, his voice completely back to normal. He calmly reminds her she only has 30 hours left to find the lock. Taking her back to his penthouse is like sealing a bug inside a glass jar. As the adrenaline wears off, Anna feels completely drained. But worse than that, as she actually feels safe with him. This reveals a sad truth about the human condition. When you are terrified enough, your brain literally rewires itself to love the monster who built your cage, just because he keeps the other monsters away. Those heavy doors slam shut, locking them inside this high-end prison. Dante casually strolls over to his bar, pours a glass of expensive scotch, and throws it back. Look at his white silk shirt. It is completely spotless. The guy just murdered 2 people and he does not have a single wrinkle. Anna holds up the heavy brass key, her shaky voice bouncing off the high ceilings. She calls him out on his game. She knows he let her take it. Dante leans against the marble counter and drops the most toxic line. He tells her a cage only works if the bird thinks it has a chance to escape. He just wanted to test her nerve. It is beautiful, sick manipulation. Here is the reality check we all need in life. Some people will hand you the key, not to set you free, but to prove they own the lock. Let us open this psychological playbook together. You and I watch Anna spiraling right now. She glares at this chunk, old-fashioned brass key. Her brain is working overtime, desperately trying to cling to logic. She knows this key goes to a physical lock, not a digital keypad. Dante watches her pace across his expensive rug as tossing out little compliments like breadcrumbs to a starving bird. She tries to fight back, reminding him she audited his accounts and knows this entire penthouse is run by computers. But Dante holds all the cards. He quietly whispers that she has not looked everywhere yet. Her pacing stops dead. The tragic flaw of smart people is thinking they can outsmart a predator. Here is the lesson. Intellect is completely useless when the game itself is rigged against you. She looks around the massive lower floor like a trapped animal. The library, the wine cellar, the big open foyer, she already ripped those places apart. The only spot left is near the master bedroom upstairs, the center of a gilded cage. She runs for the stairs, moving purely on fear, and Dante, he just walks behind her, step by step. He does not run because as a true predator enjoys watching the prey tire itself out. Anna tears into the bedroom, ignoring the expensive silk sheets. She rips open the closet, shoving past rows of designer dresses that Dante bought exactly in her size. Just think about how incredibly creepy that level of control is. She is on her knees, knocking on the walls. We always expect danger to be hiding in the dark, but the simple truth is, the real monsters buy you nice clothes. She backs out of the closet, breathing hard, muttering to herself, just to keep a grip on reality. Dante leans against the doorframe, with his arms crossed, playing the calm teacher while she completely falls apart. He gives her a hint, telling her to stop looking at the walls and look for the history. Anna scans the room, past the shiny tables and modern paintings, and then, boom, her eyes land on a massive beaten-up leather trunk resting at the foot of the bed. It is covered in iron straps and deep scratches. Her brain literally ignored it before, assuming it was just some vintage furniture. The bitter irony here is brilliant. Life teaches us this simple rule. You want to hide something truly damning? Do not bury it in the yard, leave it right in the middle of the room, and call it decoration. She drops to her knees in front of this antique trunk. Right in the middle of the iron lock is a perfectly shaped brass hole. Her hands shake uncontrollably as she slides the stolen key inside. It fits like a glove. A heavy metallic clank echoes in the room as the lock finally pops open. She throws the lid back, hoping to find a simple escape code or a pile of cash. But a mastermind does not make it that easy. The trunk is packed to the brim with manifolds, detailed blueprints, and thick stacks of surveillance photographs. She reaches in and grabs the very first folder resting on top. Her own name is printed perfectly on the white label. That is the ultimate gut punch right there. Remember this chilling truth. The scariest thing in the world is not a ghost. It is discovering someone has been studying your entire life. Anna opens that folder and her entire reality simply stops. It is a total nightmare. There are candid photos of her grabbing coffee 3 months ago, her bank records, college grades, even deep psychological profiles. Dante dissected her identity like a cold science project. As her hands shake, she uncovers files on rival crime families mixed in with her own life. Imagine the shock of realizing your private world belongs to a mob boss. Dante's charm vanishes, his voice turns to ice casually, though that her brother, Arthur, is just a useless liability. This is how you completely shatter a person. The lesson here is simple but crucial for all of us. We have to fiercely protect our boundaries, because to the wrong person, our life is just raw data waiting to be exploited. Dante steps right up behind his massive shadow, meant to make her feel completely powerless. He casually admits her brother stole $70 million, yet calls it mere pocket change. What really caught his eye was the genius accountant who hid that cash so perfectly that his own elite hackers were blind for a month. Anna stands up slowly, gripping her file like a paper shield, yelling at him for invading her life. But Dante calmly flips the script. He did not investigate her, he studied her. He watched her dismantle corporate scams, only to throw her potential away for a reckless brother. The takeaway for us is profound. True danger rarely announces itself with loud threats. It quietly studies your weaknesses, reminding us to always be careful who we truly trust. Let's look at this next reveal together though, because it changes everything. Dante tells her she has a mind sharper than a blade, but she is wasting it on lesser men. He is validating her buried genius, playing the ultimate manipulator. Anna S.'s voice finally breaks as the truth hits her. This entire terrifying ordeal was just a twisted job interview. Dante hits a button, and the heavy elevator doors slide open. There was never a security code. The door back to her normal life stands wide open. But then he steps close, whispering that a rival cartel is coming for his empire. The trap snaps shut. The life lesson here is undeniably true. The cruelest prisons we face are rarely made of steel bars. They are the toxic situations we stay in, too afraid to walk through the open door. Freeze the frame right here and examine this beautiful, devastating disaster. Notice the harsh overhead light casting long shadows across Dante's unblinking eyes. Anna is trembling violently, her breath catching as hot tears spill down her cheeks. She screams that he threw her to the wolves, her voice echoing off the cold walls. Dante merely tilts his head. He steps into her space, his rough thumb catching a single tear just as her chest heaves with panic. He whispers into the quiet dark that a king requires a queen who understands the brutal math of survival. The simple, tragic life lesson here is hard to ignore. We are often so desperate to feel valued that we will embrace the very things that destroy us simply because they make us feel completely irreplaceable. The camera pans to Dante as a razor-sharp smile touches his lips. He softly praises the way her hands shook while she lifted his keys. Watch the brilliant framing of this psychological trap. He steps back, gesturing toward the gaping steel doors of the elevator. He promises her brother is safe and the debts are wiped clean, offering a ticket back to her quiet, invisible life. But the lighting shifts, throwing half his face into total darkness. He extends a hand, his voice dropping to a hypnotic rumble. He promises that if she stays, they will tear their enemies apart together. The saddest lesson we can learn is about our own vulnerability. True manipulation does not need a weapon. It just requires a false sense of purpose that makes us willingly jump into the dark. He is literally the keys to the kingdom at her feet. The lens focuses tightly on Anna's wide eyes as she stares at the open elevator. The neon city glow promises a safe but incredibly hollow life. Slowly, her gaze drifts back to the leather trunk, spilling over with the dark proof of her own brilliant mind. She looks up at Dante. Yes, he is a total monster, but he is only person who ever looked at her and saw a genius instead of collateral damage. You can practically hear the irreversible snap of her innocence. She draws a ragged breath, clutches the files, and walks deliberately past the open doors. It is a vital lesson of Buhono's media. When we let our desperate need for validation guide our choices, it can silence our deepest instincts and lead us to ruin. Notice how her body language entirely transforms in a matter of seconds. Anna pivots slowly, lifting her chin, the amber light catching a sudden glacial emptiness in her eyes. This is the exact moment the hostage dies and the accomplice takes her first breath. When she speaks, the fear is gone. She demands the keys to his offshore empires, declaring she will wage war with ledgers instead of bullets. Dante freezes. For a breathless second he just stares. Then a terrible grin stretches across his scarred face. It is the awe of a wolf realizing the lamb has grown fangs. The life lesson here is profound. When we compromise our basic morality just a little bit of power or control, we never actually defeat our demons. We simply learn to live comfortably right beside them. Dante slowly raises his hand, tossing a black biometric card onto the heavy desk. The camera racks him staring in, closing the distance until his chest grazes her shoulder. It is a suffocating dance. He treats her like royalty, while keeping a physical threat humming in the air. Over the next 2 days, the warm penthouse fades into a freezing war room. Her silk gown is left abandoned. Anna swallowed in one of his dark shirts, the blue light of the monitors once washing over her face. She tracks their rival with the cold precision of a predator. The vital lesson here is about our endless capacity to adapt to bad situations. If we are not careful, we can get so used to surviving in the flames that we eventually forget the warmth and start calling the fire our permanent home. Focus on the intense claustrophobia of this room. Anna leans over the keyboard, the reflection of cascading code burning in her eyes. She points a finger at the screen, her void are totally flat as she signs Victor Sterling's financial death warrant. Dante looms directly behind her, his massive hands gripping her leather chair, quietly caging her in. He is utterly mesmerized. By the door, a hitman mutters that the target has heavily armed guards. Without even looking away from the glow, Anna simply nods. It is heartbreaking how seamlessly she fits into this room of hardened killers. The profound life lesson here is undeniable. When we finally stop running from our own inner darkness and fully embrace it, we stop being the prey. But we often become the very wolves we used to fear. We are witnessing a tragic metamorphosis from frightened prey to cold-blooded architect. The camera pushes in as she treats a digital assassination. There are no loud gunfights, just the silent deletion of a man's entire legacy. Notice the total detachment in her postures as she traces the encrypted numbers. But then, she pushes the knife deeper, offering to drain every account and bury it offshore. To do it, she actually volunteers to be the human bait. You and I need to pause and recognize the sick irony here. 2 days ago, this woman was begging for her life. The lesson we must learn from this is crucial. We must never tie our self-worth to the approval of toxic people, or we will eventually risk everything we have just to earn a proud smile from our own dark captors. Let us examine the brutal poetry of this trap. Anna knows Victor is a paranoid, terrified animal. If the money vanishes quietly, he will simply run away. To truly crush him, she has to elevate him to the absolute peak of arrogance before pulling the floor away. When Dante asks what bait could possibly tempt a king from his castle, Anna just points a steady finger at her own chest. This is where the psychology gets so bleak. She is actually weaponizing her own past victimhood. By broadcasting a weeping plea for rescue, she plays the helpless civilian perfectly. The life lesson here is a bitter truth about human pride. Arrogance is always a heavy blindfold. If we let our egos dictate our choices, we will gladly walk straight into a deadly trap, thinking we have already won. The tension between them suddenly snaps like a broken wire. Dante erupts, absolutely forbidding her from leaving the glass tower. In a flash of raw possessiveness, his heavy hands grip her shoulders, pinning her back against the desk. A shadow of true panic crosses his eyes. He is terrified of breaking his beautiful new instrument. But watch Anna's face. She does not even blink. She stares directly into his dark eyes, whispering that a queen does not hide under the floorboards during a siege. The camera lingers on Dante's stunned expression. The lesson here is simple but incredibly powerful. You cannot mold someone into a fearless, hardened weapon and expect them to remain submissive. True strength, once it is finally awakened, will always fiercely refuse to wear a leash. You and I need to look at this sudden shift in power. Why does a ruthless boss suddenly surrender? Because as Dante searches Anna's eyes, he sees the terrified accountant he kidnapped is gone. Only a cold predator remains. His shoulders defeated his own creation. He pulls her close, promising to burn the city down if Victor leaves a scratch on her. Anna seals this twisted deal by pulling him into a desperate yard, staking her claim on the king. The screen cuts to black, fading into the freezing fog of the East River, where the rusted beams of the Brooklyn Navy Yard loom in the dark. The cinematic tension is thick enough to choke on. The life lesson here is harsh. The thing which we try to control will always end up controlling us instead. The camera floats through the rotting warehouse to a blinding circle of halogen light. Inside a glass office sits Anna, her fingers tearing across the keyboard of a secure terminal. If you touched her chest, you would feel her heart hammering hard enough to crack ribs. On the outside, she looks carved from ice. Then, the quiet shatters. Iron doors scream as 4 black trucks smash into the building, their headlights cut through the thick dust. Heavy boots hit the floor, and the clatter of rifles echoes through the rafters. Anna does not blink. The trap is set, and her target just drove onto the killing floor. Life teaches us this reality time and time again. Pure arrogance will always blind you to the traps you are walking right into. The door of that middle truck swings open and Victor steps into the dust, wearing a clean cashmere coat. He looks like a ghost wandering through a graveyard. He walks toward the glass office with absolute swagger, wearing a smile that never reaches his cold eyes. Stepping up to the glass, he practically sings his words. He brags about knowing it was a setup until his tech guys found her distress signal. His ego is so massive he thinks he is the brave hero rescuing a weak bird from a cage. Inside, Anna keeps typing at top speed, refusing to even look at him. There is a deeply powerful truth here. Blind pride creates a dangerous illusion, making us feel completely invincible, even when the executioner's blade is already resting against our neck. The camera stays fixed on Anna. She is the definition of cold focus, lit by the pale computer screens. She demands a safe flight out in exchange for Dante's codes. Sterling laughs at her with an ugly, oily sound, promising to take good care of her once she hands over the drive. Instead, Anna hits the final button. A progress bar hits 90% and her hands stop. She slowly looks up, staring into his arrogant eyes. Her voice comes through the speaker, entirely hollow. She tells him she never came for Dante's money. She came for his. Can see the live drain out of the man as his confident Ipsum solids breaks into raw terror. The lesson here is truly unavoidable. The trap you so eagerly build for someone else is almost always the exact place where you find your own bitter end. You and I are about to watch a king lose his crown. Anna sits like a block of calmly reading off his private bank numbers. She tells him the cartel payment was just erased. Right on cue, Sterling's phone starts buzzing. He reads a text from his money guy, and the color leaves his face. $72 million, Anna whispers, pressing the final key. With one click, she deletes his entire empire. He has nothing left, and the cartel will know. His ego shatters into wild animal rage. He pulls his gun, screaming at his men to shoot the glass. But before anyone pulls a trigger, the warehouse goes entirely black. The life lesson here is incredibly clear. Your wealth and power might make you feel invincible, right up until the exact moment someone else unplugs your system. Pay attention as we see how dark this gets. This is not a messy shootout. It is a perfectly choreographed execution. Silenced sniper fire rains from the rusted walkways. Dante's killers from the shadows moving like they practiced this slaughter 1,000 times. In under 10 seconds, Sterling's team is completely wiped out. Blind in the dark, Sterling spins and fires at invisible ghosts A single bullet shatters his kneecap. He collapses to the concrete floor, screaming in sheer agony. Then, from the deep shadows behind the vehicles, Dante slowly walks into the dim emergency light. He looks exactly like the Grim Reaper coming to collect. The life lesson here is undeniably clear. You should never start a war in the dark with a man who built his entire life in the shadows. Dante's face shows nothing. He looks like a man on a peaceful walk, not a brutal executioner. Strolls toward his bleeding rival, his shoes clicking on the concrete like a ticking countdown. Sterling grabs his ruined leg. His tough guy attitude is entirely gone, replaced by pathetic terror. He begs, offering up mansions and bank accounts just to keep breathing. Dante stands there, looking down with the quiet disgust you would give a crushed say. He calmly tells Sterling that you never threaten what he claims as his own. Without blinking, Dante whispers that dead men have no room to negotiate and fires a single round. The hard life lesson here is impossible to ignore. Frantic apologies and sudden regrets mean absolutely nothing once the final consequences finally arrive. The sharp gunshot echoes, fading into the heavy rain. Anna, the slowly as the glass door open. Let us just pause for a moment to study her face. There is no shock. She does not even flinch at the bodies or the dark puddles of blood on the floor. She has grown entirely numb to the violence around her. Dante hurries over, grabbing her shoulders to make sure she is unharmed. Finding her safe, he pulls her into a crushing hug. This is where it turns truly tragic. Anna wraps her arms around him, whispering about the dark thrill of destroying their enemy. We broke him, she says. Dante kisses her like he is signing a blood-soaked contract. The scariest lesson in life might just be this. If you spend enough time staring into the dark abyss, you will eventually decide to call it your home. Dante mutters that he just took out the trash and the scene fades. An hour later, they are back in the cold penthouse. The storm has cleared, revealing a sharp view of the city skyline Dante basically owns. Anna stands by the huge windows, sipping expensive scotch. She is processing the terrifying size of the crime empire she now helps in control. Dante steps up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist like he is protecting an expensive prize. They look out at the lights, two perfect villains who found love in hell, but deep inside Anna's fingers rub the heavy brass key she secretly stole from him. The bitter life lesson to remember here: standing next to a true monster does not make you a powerful leader. It merely turns you into a monster with much better clothes. Anna lets out a tiny wicked smile. Think back to when they first entered this penthouse tonight. Dante did not lock those doors to keep her trapped. She locked them herself. She actively chose to stay inside the very cage she just took over. You and I need to really look at this. We have seen people crack under pressure, but Anna did something else entirely. She completely rewired her own brain. The final life lesson here hits like a runaway train. We all have to adapt to survive harsh environments. But the second you start falling in love with the monsters you are fighting, your soul is already gone. A corrupted mind is far more dangerous than a loaded weapon. I will leave you with this question. Did she make a brilliant move staying with the devil, or should she have run for the door?